Welcome back. In today's explainer, we are diving deep into a seriously brilliant book. It's called Invest Your Way: How to Grow Your Wealth on Your Terms, written by Mark LaMonica and Shani Jayamanne. Now, both of these authors are heavy hitters over at Morningstar, and they've put together something that completely flips the script on your traditional finance book. Because instead of pushing one perfect magical portfolio or some incredibly rigid set of rules on you, this book is intensely focused on, well, your goals, your mindset, your specific circumstances. It's really a practitioner's guide to practical, sustainable wealth building that actually feels empowering rather than exhausting. And the absolute core philosophy of this entire book is simple, but it is so profound. Just look at this. True financial freedom happens only when you stop copying generic advice. The authors make this really compelling argument that there is simply no one-size-fits-all investing strategy. Think about it. We see so much content out there telling people they absolutely must own a home or they must maximize growth, and nobody is stopping to ask what kind of life that person actually wants to live. Chasing someone else's version of success? Yeah, that's a trap.
So here's our roadmap for today's explainer. First up, we'll tackle the one-size-fits-all myth. Second, defining your personal philosophy. Third, the actual math behind financial freedom. Fourth, the psychology of risk. And finally, building your custom strategy.
Let's jump right into section 1, the one-size-fits-all myth, and exactly why generic advice completely fails us. Okay, so the finance industry absolutely loves to sell you a rigid formula, mainly because it's incredibly easy to market. But conventional wisdom almost always ignores your individual context. Take the authors of the book themselves, Mark and Shani. Mark focuses heavily on shares and ETFs, right? While Shani builds her wealth primarily through property. These are two highly successful professionals who vehemently disagree on the specific vehicle, basically avoiding that classic stocks versus real estate dinner party debate. But they entirely agree on the underlying system. And this just shows us that variance is totally normal. Two completely different investment paths can absolutely lead to the exact same destination of financial security. You do not have to force yourself into an asset class that just doesn't fit your life.
Which brings us to section 2, your personal financial philosophy. Who actually are you as an investor? See, before you touch portfolio construction or pick even a single stock, you really have to ask yourself, what does investing on your terms actually mean in real life? The authors are adamant that you've got to develop this personal philosophy first. Like, is having multiple ways to win too hands-off for you, or do you find that liberating? You have to deeply consider your own values and your own goals. The book essentially acts as a guide to self-knowledge. It helps you figure out what financial freedom means specifically to you, instead of just absorbing whatever the market hype happens to be yelling about today.
All right, moving to section 3, the math behind financial freedom. Let's talk about how to reverse engineer wealth. Once you've got that philosophical foundation set, it is time to shift to the highly practical math they cover in Chapter 3. The authors lay out this wealth-building game using 4 concrete variables. Think of them like levers. Step 1 is your savings rate. Step 2 is time, literally how long you have to let compounding do its magic. Step 3 is your investment returns. And Step 4 is your target number. Understanding this math is incredibly empowering because, well, these are basically the only levers you have to pull. It takes this vague, kind of intimidating desire of, I want to be rich, and turns it into a clear, reverse-engineered roadmap. Like, if you have less time, you just have to pull that savings rate lever a little harder. You aren't just guessing in the dark anymore, you're plugging your actual life into a formula that you control. But let's zoom in on that target number for a second, because establishing your specific target number is the linchpin of your whole strategy. Why? Because it dictates exactly how much risk you actually need to take in the market. Think about it this way. If your target number requires a steady, say, 6% annual return to hit your goals in your desired time frame, you don't need to lose sleep taking on massive risk chasing a 15% return on some highly speculative tech stock. Your target number literally gives you permission to ignore the noise and just run your own race.
That leads us nicely into section 4, the psychology of risk, or investors behaving badly.
So what happens when the market doesn't cooperate? Well, the biggest obstacle in wealth building isn't actually the stock market itself, it's us. The book fundamentally redefines risk here. The traditional definition of risk is just market volatility, right? The numbers bouncing up and down on a screen. But Mark and Shani redefine risk as your own behavior during a downturn. The biggest threat to your portfolio isn't the stock market dropping 20%. No, the biggest risk is you logging into your brokerage account in a cold sweat, totally panicking, and hitting the sell button. Risk is really about our own unforced errors.
And man, we fall into the same behavioral pitfalls over and over again. Overtrading, chasing hot returns, emotional decision-making, or just completely ignoring our carefully crafted long-term plan because someone on the internet yelled really loudly about a new cryptocurrency. A core message of this book is that in investing, we have met the enemy, and it is our own caveman brains. The biggest drag on our returns usually comes from our own habits. Real success in investing comes from patience, resilience, consistency, and having the discipline to stick to the plan you created when you were thinking clearly, not when you were panicking.
Finally, we reach Section 5, building a custom strategy and scaffolding your plan. This takes us right into the reconstruction phase. The book doesn't just leave you hanging with theory. It provides actual practical exercises to build a customized plan by stripping away all that complex, intimidating finance jargon. So instead of getting bogged down in crazy mathematical models for diversification, just think of it simply as not putting all your eggs in one basket. And instead of treating asset allocation like some heavily guarded Wall Street secret, it's just the process of finding the right mix of shares, ETFs, and property that fits your unique life and your risk tolerance. By breaking it down this way, you can confidently construct your own customized asset mix without feeling totally overwhelmed by the whole thing. Ultimately, everything we've talked about boils down to this single truth. Lasting success comes from focusing only on what you can control. You can't predict market movements. You cannot control interest rates or the broader economy. But you absolutely can control your goals. You can control your savings habits. You can control your strategy. And most importantly, you can control your behavior. Tailoring your strategy to your terms doesn't just lead to better financial outcomes. It leads to a whole lot less stress along the way. I want to leave you with this provocative final thought drawn straight from the themes of the book. If you didn't know who you are, how much will it cost to find out? Because as the authors strongly imply, Wall Street is a very, very expensive place to find out who you really are. Take the time to understand yourself first, and the investing part, that will naturally follow. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer on Invest Your Way. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next explainer, and I will see you next time.